Demystifying IEP Facilitation with Dr. Rob Kiter, CERC Program Coordinator. October 23rd, 2024. CERC's Wisdom Wednesday webinar series.
Welcome to the October 23rd, 2024 Wisdom Wednesday webinar presented by the Special Education Resolution Center. My name is Rob Kiter. I'm a CERC Program Coordinator. CERC stands for Special Education Resolution Center. I'll probably say CERC moving forward. I'll be hosting today's webinar along with presenting on the topic of demystifying IEP facilitation. After the presentation, our Assistant Director, Dr. Allison Conch, will be introducing our panelists who will be addressing questions related to today's topic. A few things I want to mention to you. There are several handouts that I've put in the chat. The PDF of today's presentation, along with our updated communication guidelines postcard. You can download those. Also, we are recording this webinar, and all materials related to it, such as the PDF presentation, the transcript, anything else that goes with it, will be on our website probably in several weeks. A few other things, you're not using audio or video during the webinar, but you can engage using emojis with chat, such as thumbs up or thumbs down or raising your hand. If you have any questions for me or for the panel that will actually be with us today, we're excited to have a panel discussion about some questions. If you'll go ahead and type those in the Q&A section, we'll keep an eye out for those. Dr. Conch will keep an eye out for those to bring those up when I finish the presentation. We are providing real-time closed captioning for this webinar. You can click on the CC Live transcript button at the bottom of the Zoom screen to either turn on or off captioning, as well as to adjust the size and other settings. As I mentioned, we're recording the webinar, and we'll be making that recording available on our website soon. We'll probably be pushing that out within a few weeks. There is a short survey that we would ask you to complete at the end of the webinar. There'll be a QR code that you'll be able to access from the presentation. And we hope you really enjoy this webinar. Okay, I'm going to jump right into things so that we can get through this presentation and be able to have some fun with these, I think, really important questions with our panelists. The title again is Demystifying IEP Facilitation, and the idea here is to kind of take any mystery out of it. What are the basics that you need to understand? Who, what, when, where, how, when you're talking about IEP facilitation? Everybody knows what an IEP meeting is, but what is IEP facilitation? So let me start off just with the real big picture. Who are we? Because we provide this service. So the Special Education Resolution Center, we're a third-party, neutral organization, and our mission is really clear: to help families and schools resolve disputes at the earliest stage possible. CERC serves in partnership with the Oklahoma State Department of Education and the OSU Department of Wellness, and Sponsored Programs is the lead agency. CERC is not an advocate for families or schools, and we have to say this all the time on the phone and in any presentation because it really can easily be misconstrued. I'll tell folks I'm not an advocate for the parent or for the school. Really, I'm an advocate for the process of helping families and schools work together, helping them be able to engage and resolve conflict possibly. But we work with both in supporting the IEP team process. And the important thing is what we provide is at no cost to families or schools through our contract with the State Department of Education. So just a little bit of background of who we are. A little more about CERC. I kind of think of it as the two sides of the same coin, the CERC coin. And you can choose which side is which, but one side would be trainings. We do a lot of stakeholder training with the goal of really all of them is to build capacity at the local level, at the district level. We provide a facilitation training, which is a one-day training to sharpen skills, learn skills related to if you are facilitating any type of meeting, including an IEP meeting and including difficult meetings. This training will be really helpful to help you sharpen your skills, learn new strategies and tools for engaging conflict in difficult meetings. That's a one-day training that we do each month in either Tulsa Regional or the Oklahoma City region. By the way, all of these things, the trainings that we're looking at on the left side, these are all on our website. I didn't have it listed here, but okcirc.org is our website. And if you go to the website and you look at the top left of the menu, it'll say programs and services. You click on that, you can go down to stakeholder training. So the trainings that I'm talking about here, along with a number of other trainings, they're on that page. The one-day training is facilitation training. Again, no cost. You register online. Crucial Conversations for Mastering Dialogue is a trademarked international training that we're licensed to provide for educators K through 12. And so we do that course just like the facilitation training. It meets 2 days, 8:30 to 4 o'clock, but it rotates between OKC Regional, Tulsa Regional. This is a fantastic training to help you. It's not just a training on communication, but really communication with the goal of helping you get the results that you really want and need through your interactions with others. So it can be very helpful. We do trainings for administrators right now. We do trainings for special ed directors and staff, and those are on that stakeholder training page. And then specialized monthly webinars. That's what we're doing today. This is our first Wisdom Wednesday webinar for the fall of 2024. We have 7 webinars scheduled through next spring. And so we do that. And then I just simply have other trainings, and you'll see a lot of other ones that are possibilities. We do custom trainings as well. If there's a specific need you have, you can reach out to us and we might be able to develop a training for you. So that's half of the one side of the coin is trainings. The other side is services that we provide. The first thing we just mentioned would be consultations, individual debriefs. We encourage parents, we encourage school personnel to call us if you have any questions about what you're going through. Maybe it's a conflict situation and you're just needing, we can't tell you what to do, but we're more than willing to listen to you and better understand your situation. And then we can give you some options that might work for you. Whether or not maybe a IEP facilitation, that's the next thing that's listed. That's what we're talking about today. Whether that might be appropriate for you, or whether mediation might be more appropriate where there is a specific clear dispute going on, or facilitated resolution session as part of a due process request. But the point is, we spend a lot of time on the phone with folks. We really want to understand your situation, and we want to let you know what's available from CIRC. We do trainings. We also provide services, and we're going to talk more about those services in the rest of this webinar today. So once again,
Bob, mind if I hop in real quick?
Yeah.
So I will say sometimes we get calls from families and schools that just, for families in particular, want to ask questions about special ed, or maybe they've just moved to the state, or maybe they don't quite understand the process because their kid's just getting evaluated and they just need to hear an answer from someone who maybe isn't the school personnel. And so not every call results in a service. Sometimes we're answering questions and referring families on to if they need to call the State Department for more in-depth questions, or if they need a referral to an advocacy agency, because like Rob has said, we are not an advocate. However, that doesn't mean that our services can't be provided in conjunction with a parent bringing an advocate. It doesn't preclude the parent from using either. So even if you don't know if you need a service, or if you think, hey, I don't think I do, but I want to talk to someone, we can certainly answer some questions that parents or schools have as well. So I just wanted to make sure that was available to people.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So there may not be a service needed. That call in and of itself may be able to help you. But we want to be available to you. And then as we said here at the bottom, we're not advocates, but we work with parents and schools in supporting the IEP team process. Okay, let's talk about facilitated IEP meetings. Just a few basic things to help special education planning teams, which are IEP teams, reach agreements. The Oklahoma State Department of Education, in partnership with CERC, we provide the option of facilitated IEP meetings, individualized education program meetings. I should mention to you right here, again, remember our mission is helping families and schools resolve disputes at the earliest stage possible. IEP facilitation is not specifically written into the IDEA. It's not a required service. But I do want you to know that in many states around the country, facilitated IEP meetings are becoming seen really as a best practice, especially in that early intervention, maybe before things actually get to the point of a clear dispute where mediation would be needed. So Oklahoma is one of those states, and I think we're probably kind of on the leading edge here of really promoting and offering facilitated IEP meetings as a service that's provided. So just wanted to let you know that it's not always the case in every state, but it is for us. Now, when the shared work is challenging, the work within an IEP team and the relationship possibly between families and schools is strained, the use of a specially trained facilitator might be beneficial. That's where you're reaching out to us to send a neutral, impartial third party to come and help the team. At the meeting, the facilitator will model and support communication skills and strategies that can help create an environment in which the IEP team members can maybe better listen to each other, each member's point of view as they work together and try to collaborate to develop an IEP. That's the big picture of what we're doing here, and then we'll break it down more. So a facilitator can help members of the IEP team stay focused on the development of the IEP by doing several things. A facilitator can help facilitate shared understanding of the student. Facilitator can help to clarify the needs of the student and objectives of the team. Facilitator can help the team explore diverse opinions and perspectives. Definitely can help address conflicts and disagreements that may arise during the meeting, and just basically help support the team as they work together to reach agreements in service of the student. Now, and we're going to come back and say a little bit more about what the facilitator does, but how do you request a facilitator? First of all, either a parent or school can request. And that's really the same for mediation as well, which we'll be talking about in our next webinar. But either parent or school can request, but both parent and school must agree to use a facilitator. So here's what you do. You would contact CERC for that intake call that Allison talked a little bit about. If a service is needed and you would like to request a service, we're going to get you the forms and you're going to complete the agreement forms. Both the school and parent complete an agreement form, and the parent has one additional consent form to release confidential information that, for instance, the facilitator would be seeing. The parent and school are going to complete those forms and get those back to our office. And then I just mentioned here that those forms are available on our website. We give you the web address here, also by calling our office, emailing our office. We want to make it easy for you so that nobody, there's no bureaucratic hurdle. But that's what you do in making a request to have a facilitated IEP meeting. And then what happens once we get that request? So once we receive the agreement from both parent and school. We're going to work with the school and parent and assigned facilitator to end up with a mutually agreeable time and location. This may be scheduled within a few days or weeks of the initial request. You know, we've got to work out some of those logistics in terms of the place and the time that works for everyone, but we try to get on that right away.
Hey, Rob.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, I want to pop in on one other thing that I just that I realize I get questions on when either the school's reaching out or the parent has reached out, whoever's requesting first. They're always curious, like, now is it on them, either the parent or the school, to reach out to the other party? Does CERC do that for them? And so typically I will ask, if it's a school, I will say, you know, depending upon your relationship with this parent, you're welcome to have the conversation. I will eventually do an intake call, or I can do the initial reach out. When parents request, I typically let them know, because I don't want the burden to be on them, that I will reach out to the school and have that conversation, but they're certainly welcome to let the school know they've requested it too, but that we will help to facilitate getting the second party's agreement. It's not on the requesting person to try to get them to agree, because we don't want to necessarily put you in that position. So I do want to clarify that part as well.
Yeah, that's really helpful to know. Thank you for sharing that. Now, regarding the facilitator selection, who's going to be, we have a group, we have 9 facilitators who are also our mediators. All of our mediators also serve as facilitators for IEP meetings. And so one of our 9 facilitators will be assigned to the case, and they're assigned on a random rotational basis. That's the first method that we use, the main primary method. However, sometimes if there might be a need for a follow-up session to a facilitated IEP meeting, now this is something that would have to be determined on a case-by-case basis with approval by our office, because we're not embedded in the process in terms of offering a facilitator for an IEP meeting. But if there is a need for a follow-up session, it might be, we would often try to attempt to secure the same facilitator who is already familiar with the parties and the issues in the meeting. Anything else you want to say about that, Allison, or is that, you think, clear?
No, I mean, I think that covers it. Yeah, I mean, and I appreciate that, making the point about us not being embedded, and because we are a statewide agency, and currently we have 3 full-time employees to serve the state. And like Rob said, we've got these mediators and facilitators, but they're on contract. Okay. So we're trying our best to serve the state, number one. And so we can't, you know, live and breathe with the one family in one school in a single situation. And number 2, the purpose of the facilitation is to be that intervening measure, like Rob talked about, to get the parties going, moving forward, model and teach those communication skills and talk through it. And so sometimes it does need, we understand there are situations that might need a couple of repeats, but we just can't live and breathe in that IEP team meeting, because that kind of defeats the process, and we're not IEP team members. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, and then with that, Allison, what I usually do if I'm facilitating a meeting and there's a question of that, I will let the parties know to reach out to our office if that's something that they're requesting for, you know, for another service. Okay. Okay, so that's how. Now, back to the role of the facilitator. The facilitator's role in the meeting. So the facilitator is a neutral, impartial person that attends the IEP meeting but doesn't lead the meeting. And I'm gonna show this to you in several ways when we look at just a couple slides that show similarities between IEP, facilitated IEP meeting, and mediation. But for now, let's think about this. The facilitator attends the meeting without leading the meeting. The facilitator steps in as needed to manage conflict and help the team stay focused as they discuss the issues in collaboration. So we got a picture of a bus here. I think Allison added this picture, which I really like, because this is really what I wanted to share with you anyway, this metaphor of the bus. So I think it'll help you see the difference between facilitation and mediation, because when I use myself as an example, if I'm doing a mediation, I'm driving the bus. I'm leading the whole process. I'm managing the process. I'm managing the parties. I not only set the tone, but I do a lot of work throughout the entire session, including finally drafting up any agreements that are reached. I drive the bus. If I'm facilitating an IEP meeting, which is our focus today, I'm not really driving the bus, but I like to think of I'm sitting on the first row. I'm still welcoming all of the participants on the IEP bus. I'm welcoming them. I'm setting the tone for the drive, which I'm going to use drive as an analogy for the meeting. And we'll talk about that in a minute. I set the tone for that. I welcome the participants. And then when I'm done setting the tone, I turn things over to the bus driver and I sit back down on that first row. And then from that point on, I assist the team as needed to help them have the best conversation possible so that they can discuss all the issues in a safe and structured setting. They can do their serious work of deliberating to make decisions for the student's education. So I'm not leading the meeting, not driving the bus, but I am involved. I'm assisting the team as needed. Now, the service purpose facilitation may be appropriate when a parent or school are unable to agree upon important issues related to a child's IEP, but it also could just be when a meeting is expected to address complex or controversial topics, or when past experience shows that team conversations have really become strained or conflicted. That's when the use of an outside neutral third-party facilitator might really benefit the team. So that's the role in the meeting. We'll look at a little bit more of that. Now, I've got a few slides here, how to prepare for a facilitated IEP meeting. First of all, for family members. So if you're a parent, this might really benefit you. It's not exhaustive, but I think these are some good ones to think about. First of all, I'm mentioning, and this is going to be the same for the school slide, but review the CERC communications guidelines prior to the meeting. Now, I don't have these guidelines right here, but I did put them in the chat. As I mentioned, that postcard that shares the 5 guidelines. I just will briefly mention these to you right now so we don't run out of time. But when I'm facilitating a meeting, before the meeting ever happens, I send these guidelines to the parent and the school. And so I'm suggesting right here, I think one of the first ways to prepare is to go over on your own before this meeting ever happens. Take a look at these guidelines. And then at the beginning of the meeting, the first thing I'm going to do after sharing a few other things that are important for the team to understand, I'm going to be setting the tone by sharing these guidelines. And they are very straightforward. I'll just mention them to you right here, and you can look at them if you want to download those in the chat. But number one, just realizing that everyone will have an opportunity to share. So and I say it this way, if you have anything important to share, any ideas, suggestions, proposals, you will have an opportunity to do that. And then the practical takeaway is, in light of that, let's let whoever's speaking finish their complete thought without interrupting. Just helps the meeting go a lot better. That's the first guideline. Second guideline is, let's try to keep the focus on the student. There are adults in the room making important decisions, and we may need to talk about them some, but let's keep the focus on the student, not on the adults in the room. The third is, let's try to keep the focus on the future. There may be important things that have happened in the past, and we can certainly address those up to a point, but the real benefit here is to think about, what do we want things to look like moving forward? So let's try to keep the focus on the future, not the past. And then I'll just mention there's 2 more. Fourth one is, when you do share, whatever you're going to share, I know there's a way you can do it that's both honest and respectful. So try to think about, whenever you're going to share something, how can I say this in a way that makes it a little easier for others to hear, understand, and respond to me. And then finally, is just to say, maybe even more important than what we're sharing is listening to whoever's speaking, and really trying to listen for understanding what the person's saying, where they're coming from, not just listening to come up with answers. Those are the CERC communication guidelines. And so I encourage families and schools to think about these before the meeting, but also want you to know that if I was facilitating the meeting, after I share a few other things, like I'm not going to be making any decisions for the team, these are all your decisions. I'm not representing the parent or the school, kind of things that we've talked about. I'm not leading the meeting. I'm here to assist the team as needed. The last thing I'm going to do is go over those communication guidelines. And what I do at the end of that is I will try to get buy-in from the team. And I'll say, you know, do these seem reasonable to you? Do you think we can follow these today? And in my experience, they always say yes. And that's really helpful because I'll say, okay, we're going to follow these. And sometimes we may need to return to those guidelines if things start going down some roads that they don't need to be heading down. But that's the first thing. Review the CERT communications guidelines. But I'll promise you I won't spend a lot of time on any of these other points, so we'll run out of time. But
Hey, Rob,
yeah,
like tying in what you just said with, you know, setting the tone, setting expectations, and the bus analogy, which I just love because you're there as like the navigator. And because after you've done those initial steps, or any of our facilitators have done them, the rest of the ride, the meeting, all depends on the parties and the bus driver and the passengers, if you will. And so it could go either way. And I love how you said depends upon what road they're going down, if you need to return to those guidelines, or if you need to tell everybody to get off the bus for a minute to take a break, or whatever the case may be. And I love using that. I think that analogy is so perfect so that parties understand that their IEP meeting, once it's set the stage in that way, you may be just fine. You've given the bus driver their instructions and navigation and it goes smoothly and you don't have to intervene so much. Or there may be situations where you're intervening and redirecting quite a bit, whether that's communication issues, people needing breaks, miscommunications, not necessarily combative, but things like that. And so I think that's important. I love the explanation, important for schools and parents to know that after that initial setting the tone, it's going to vary just depending upon what the parties, how they interact. So I
yeah,
think that's a big point because, you know, they always want to know what it's going to look like. I'm like, it's dependent upon the people in the meeting once it's started.
that is a great point that you brought up. It's one of those areas that we really could spend some time talking about because you don't know. Every facilitated IEP meeting is unique. Every mediation is unique, and what happens with the parties, between the parties, is a huge deal. So things may once I share those guidelines, the last thing I'm going to do is ask the parties, the team, if they have any questions about what's happening today or what my role is going to be. As I mentioned, I'd be assisting as needed. And then if they have any, I address those, and then I turn things over to the school in a facilitated IEP meeting, and they start driving the bus. I'm there with them. And then, like you said, that's a great way to think about it. Their collaboration, the experience on that bus ride may be really good. And sometimes literally I end up with at the end of a meeting and think, I don't know if I really did a lot today at all. I mean, after setting the tone and, you know, maybe just my presence there, I don't know, but sometimes I don't have to intervene a lot. Other meetings, I really make up for that, and I end up intervening a lot more. So every meeting's different, but thank you for bringing that up. Again, for parents, in terms of family preparation, I think reviewing the current IEP, or if you've been sent a draft prior to the meeting that's just a draft, it's still good to look at this so that you know it's not just the first time you're looking at this during the meeting. That can help you. I think preparing a written list of issues that you want to discuss, I didn't use the exact word, but concerns that you want to address, questions you want to ask, proposals that you want to make. Thinking through those things, I think, could be a big part of preparation. Now, I'm excited to see what, you know, the response will be with our panel a little later, because I just wanted to give you some basics here, but they'll probably have some really good ideas. Organize your documents. This is families again, recording dates and notes that are important on them. You may even want to make copies of some of the information to share with the team and the facilitator. I mentioned here that you might think about attending or a workshop or a training conducted by a parent center to learn about your role and responsibilities as a member of the IEP team, or you may even reach out to an advocate to help you prepare for a meeting. I mean, I found that advocates can be very, very helpful to the family and actually to the team when they're coming in really with a collaborative mindset. We give you some more resources at the end of this presentation for that. Couple other things, and these are going to be the same both for families and school, but be willing to listen and carefully consider the others' ideas and possible solutions. That was part of the communication guidelines, but it can't be said enough. Be willing to give serious consideration. Understand how your own behavior can affect others. You know, negative behavior that maybe puts people on the defensive, and positive behaviors that can help possibly to bring us together or keep us talking about things. But think about your own behavior, because that's the only behavior that you really can control. I think a huge thing that goes along with listening is maybe even to back it up a little bit more, think about the way you see the others on the team. This would be true if your parents looking at the school team members, or if your school team members thinking about parents and possibly their advocates. But how are you seeing them? And sometimes I'll actually take a little bit of time with the team to talk about this, but I would at least mention it today. I think the way you see the others plays a huge factor in your ability to listen, in the way you're going to speak when you open your mouth. If you see the others on the team as allies, that's going to really make it. You're going to be hearing the good things, the things that could make for possibilities or options or solutions when others are talking. If you're seeing them as adversaries, you're not going to hear those good things. You're going to pick up on all kinds of things that'll end up separating you and dividing you even more. So, and the one thing I think that's really, I don't know if I'm sorry. The one thing I think that's powerful about that is that you really can choose the way you see others. I love this quote. I don't have it in here. I use it in the facilitation training. It's by Wayne Dyer, but he says, if we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. And that's a profound quote. So try to make an effort prior to that meeting to really, in the big picture, see the others on this team as allies. We are on the same team for the child. And even though there might be differences of thought, a difference of opinion in terms of strategies and what the best solutions really look like, just starting off with that ally picture can make a gigantic difference. Okay. The last thing, just on a really practical note, is arrive a little early so that you've got plenty of time to participate and find your place, and you're not rushed. That's family preparation. Some things for schools to think about in terms of preparing. First of all, same thing, review the CERC communication guidelines that will be shared. Now, here's where it's different. Think about your agenda. Remember, if it's the teacher of record or the special education director, it's not always the same person, but somebody from the school is going to actually be leading that meeting and walking through the agenda, driving the bus, back to that metaphor. So think about your agenda. It'd be great to have a printed agenda, but definitely a clear agenda, including any concerns you or the parent might have that definitely need to be part of this meeting. Because every meeting, again, is different. When I come in to facilitate a meeting, sometimes it's an annual review and update. Sometimes it's a meeting specifically to address parents' concerns. Sometimes it's a meeting to go over test results. And I mean, it could be many different things, but be clear about what it is. Prepare a written list. This is, again, from the school side, of what you want to discuss, questions you want to ask, and proposals that you want to make. Bring materials that may be helpful to explain or inform others, including test results and other materials that might aid the team. in its discussions and deliberations. And then I think the last one's good. Ask questions that maybe help you better understand the parent's main interests and concerns.
Hey,
So,
Rob,
yeah.
I think this is a good, I'm just reminding me of a previous webinar we've done and in talking to schools and parents about understanding the other side, the interests, the concerns, the perspective. You know, for schools to really understand that parents are coming in with this different perspective about their child, they're the expert on their child, and that maybe they have completely different worries. They're going to be worrying about their kid for a lifetime, right? They're dealing with things at home that the school may be not aware of. The school's worried about this component of their child and for this amount of time, right? And so for the school to really think about where the parent's coming from, and a lot of times if parents are angry or emotional, that's really coming from a place of either confusion, fear, whatever the case may be. It's coming from some other emotion. And then I would really encourage any schools to, we have a webinar called I think it's called positive parenting and advocacy approaches, or parent perspective and advocacy approaches, on our archived page, where a parent kind of walked through of a child with a significant disability, walks through what she deals with and how she approaches schools. And then also to remind parents who I get coming into these meetings, it's very intimidating, right? Because it's like, oh, it's this organization. Well, they're all humans in there too, right? They've got their own fears or perspectives or whatever as well. And it goes back to your point of seeing each other as allies. Everybody's a human being. And so I think sometimes making sure to really think about that perspective. And I know the facilitator can also help do that for the parties, to help each other understand where they're coming from and what they're operating out of. Sorry.
No, that's really, really good. And I think I like the way that you tied to that to the way we see the others, seeing them as allies, because I didn't mention it here, but it is true for both parents and schools. One very helpful thing is to try to put yourself in the other person's place, you know, and think about what they might be feeling, what they might be thinking, what their interests are, the way this looks and feels to them. That can make a big difference in our being able to work together. So I appreciate that. And I'm sure we'll get some more thoughts from the panelists too about that when we get to those questions. Again, same thing as I mentioned, for schools, be willing to listen, carefully consider, think about your own behavior, seeing the parents and their advocate or whoever's with them as allies rather than adversaries, and then, you know, giving yourself some time to show up. Just got a slide here, just in the big picture, measure of success. Well, at the conclusion, what we'd love to see is an intended outcome would be an IEP that's supported by team members that benefits the child. And we'll talk more about this. We'd love to see, you know, consensus, or at least my goal as a facilitator is that for collaboration to be able to take place in that meeting, for the parties to have a good conversation as they are discussing the issues and deliberating. But we're looking for this kind of an outcome. We're also thinking and hoping that a facilitated IEP meeting can have a positive impact on relationships. We're not going to be there always, as we've said, but hopefully those relationships can be improved through what happens. Maybe improving creative problem solving, establishing some common ground and purpose, and hopefully resulting in better communication and improved relationships when the team continues to meet in the future. So impact on relationships. And when we finish a meeting, we ask our facilitators and we ask parents and schools, do you feel like this meeting, in your opinion, had what kind of impact on the relationship between the parent and school? Was it a positive impact, no impact, negative impact? I mean, we want to know, because our goal is we'd like to see an improved impact on relationships. And then finally, some other considerations, respect the facilitator role and be willing to participate. And then reminding you, everyone, again, the facilitator isn't an advocate. Sometimes it's easy to look to the facilitator to be an advocate. And we're not going to typically address issues that are unrelated to the IEP that may come up in a meeting where somebody doesn't like someone else, want someone else to not be part of the team or not be, working in the school anymore, or whatever it would be. There can be things like that that come up that we're typically not going to be, moving that conversation forward. Look at some similarities. We're kind of winding some things down. I won't take a lot of times on these, but again, for IEP facilitation and mediation, remember the request starts with the intake call. If needed, the forms are going to be completed, and then we're going to help you, get that meeting scheduled at an agreeable time and place for everyone. We already mentioned we're not embedded, but we do help where there's disagreement and potential high conflict, and maybe even an additional meeting if needed. Preparation, I just shared a lot of things, but just a few others that would work for both. Think of the main concerns or issues you want to discuss. Consider the child's needs and opinion related to their own education. Be willing to listen to others' ideas and think creatively. We mentioned this already, but the impact on relationship, it can build or strengthen relationships. It can improve creative thinking and problem solving in a team dynamic. And that's what we hope. We hope that it'll make a difference there as you continue on in your future meetings. Now, this is going to kind of show you a different way. We talked about this before, but the facilitator role in an IEP meeting, remember, I attend the session, but I don't lead. I assist the team as needed. I ride the bus with the team, and I step in as needed for communication, for clarification, asking questions to clarify understanding, to bridge the gap, to help the team sometimes, well, a lot of times reframe from past maybe to future, from negative to positive to options. So that's the stepping in as needed, assisting. But if you look over in mediation, driving the bus, leading the session by helping them discuss the issues, helping them negotiate with each other, exploring, trying to find options and solutions that will resolve the dispute. And then ultimately even writing up an agreement wherever the parties have reached agreement. Look at the difference between the service purpose in terms of where the meeting takes place. Well, if it's a facilitated IEP meeting, it just occurs in the context of the IEP team process. Just getting special permission to have an impartial third-party facilitator join the meeting and help. In mediation, it happens completely outside of the IEP team process. We'll be talking a lot more about that next month, but it will be a completely separate meeting to address those issues. The measure of success for IEP facilitation, well, we're shooting for, we'd like to see team consensus IEP calculated to meet the students' unique needs. In mediation, the measure of success ultimately is a written, legally binding agreement between the school and the parent that lists out the specific agreements that were reached and that's enforceable in any court of competent jurisdiction. So you can, a different way again of looking at the driving the bus in mediation, riding the bus and assisting the team in facilitated IEP meetings. Recap here, a neutral third party, the facilitator, attends to assist, not lead the team through the IEP process during, and then we just give you the options here. IEP review might be an amendment meeting, eligibility meeting, parent concern meeting. It could go on and on and on, whatever the agenda is. The attended outcome is a successful IEP meeting with improved relationships between parties and consensus regarding the student's educational plan. Real quick before we're out of time and we're shifting over, I want to just briefly mention a few other dispute resolution options. Mediation, we've already mentioned it several times, but this is available to the parties where there are matters in dispute. There's a clear dispute in one or several issues related to IDEA. Same as IEP facilitation, either the school or parent can request it. Both need to agree to use it, complete the related forms. Forms are available at the same place that they are for IEP facilitation on our site or by calling us. The difference, one of the differences is agreements that are reached in mediation do result in a written agreement that the mediator will draw up at the meeting, allow the parties to review and ultimately sign if they're satisfied that agreement. And then that agreement is enforceable in any court of competent jurisdiction. It lays out the expectations of the parties. Mediation will be the focus of next month's Wisdom Wednesday webinar. Another dispute resolution option would be filing a formal state complaint. The state complaint can be filed to the Oklahoma State Department of Education, and this is important, on alleged violations of the IDEA. They really need to be Individual with Disabilities Education Act specific. The complaint form must include statements as to the school's violation of IDEA and the facts that support the statements of alleged violations within previous 12 months. The Oklahoma State Department of Education will review the complaint, determine if it's sufficient to open for an investigation, and issue a decision within 60 calendar days. Now, this is important to know. IDEA violations do not include matters like general anger with the school, experiences of disrespect from school personnel, general education issues, personality issues. It really needs to be related to IDEA and the provision of faith. Very much IEP associated, obviously, as well. I know you're sitting there. I know you're going to mention something, Allison.
Yeah.
So I just briefly want you to know this is, this is another procedural safeguard. It's another dispute resolution option that you need to be aware of. Take it away.
I was just going to say, it's not that we are saying those other things don't happen, that like maybe a principal is rude. I mean, we get it. It's just that the State Department doesn't have authority over those issues in terms of a state complaint regarding special education. And when we say general education issues, we don't mean like least restrictive environment or things like that, because that's related to faith. We mean like, well, this teacher of my kid's math class, again, might be mean, or I don't like this teacher because it's my ex-sister-in-law, or whatever the case may be. Not saying those things don't happen, not saying there's not other anger-inducing things that might occur in your relationship, a parent's relationship with the school, and vice versa. It just doesn't fall under this jurisdiction. So I just wanted to make sure that that was understood.
Yeah, thank you. That's important. So that's a process. And then we just mentioned here that if a state complaint has been filed, mediation is an option to resolve the IDEA issues in a state complaint. And the parent has the option. The parent may choose to dismiss that complaint if they decide to. And then finally, the most legal process there is due process. A parent or a school may file a due process complaint regarding, once again, issues related to the identification, evaluation, or educational placement of a child with a disability, or the provision of FAPE, which is the free and appropriate public education, and all that involves. It must allege IDEA violations or a violation that have occurred within 2 years of the filing. And it's really important to understand that a due process request really initiates a legal court-like proceeding that includes requirements for both parties, legal requirements, timelines to adhere to, assignment of a hearing officer to the case, etc. Due to the legal nature of this dispute resolution, many school districts choose to be represented by an attorney once a request is filed at their discretion and expense. Parents may also choose to have legal representation at their discretion and expense. I do want to say, and Allison may have something to mention here, but there's so much involved in this. I wanted to get it in this presentation and get it in the PDF so that you have it in front of you. There's more about this on our website. Also, we did a 3-part Wisdom Wednesday webinar. We did 3 webinars at the beginning of 2024 on understanding due process, because it is such a serious process and you really need to know what it involves. I think you would want to before you would pull the trigger on a dispute resolution process such as that. Anything else you want to mention on that, Allison?
I think you mostly covered it. I think, we've recently rearranged some things on our website and made, when you go to programs and services on our website and click due process, we've even organized the resources of like, hey, here are some things that you're not required to, because it is a parental right, a procedural safeguard for parents, but here are some things that would be really helpful to look at before you file. Here are some things that you could look at during your file, once you filed, things like that. So we've kind of organized it in that way to be as helpful as possible. I mean, I do, if there are parents or schools, because schools could file it as well. Technically, it's more often parents. Just encourage people, if that's something they're considering, like you said, Rob, really look at those webinars, look at all the resources on there, because we've ended up having parties file and then they're shocked by what's coming and they become frustrated by the federal legal requirements that have to occur in due process. And so we would rather parties be well informed and know what they're about to walk into before they do something that is pretty intense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's your recommendations match mine.
Okay, good. Some resource want to leave you with, obviously, CERC, any way that we can help you both, there's a lot of helpful resources, I think, on our website. And then also we'd love to speak with you. So you can call us or reach out to us by email. Cadre is the Oklahoma Special Education Program's federally funded nationwide technical assistance resource that we work with. We love Cadre, and there are a lot of tremendous resources from Cadre that we want to bring to you. And I think on our website do we have a link to Cadre and such?
We do for some other resources. Yeah, it stands for the Center for Appropriate Dispute Resolution.
Yeah.
Special Education. Yeah, we have some of that, and we really emulate what they do because they're in partnership with the federal Department of Special Ed, basically, just like we're in partnership with the state department. So very similar.
And then, of course, our state Department of Education, Special Education Services, can help provide guidance to families, advocates, districts, and aid in continued conversation. So, State Department of Education is there to help you. We work together in partnership. And then Oklahoma Parent Center is Oklahoma's federally funded parent training and information center. They do a lot of workshops and have a lot of helpful resources, including advocates that are able to answer questions and help parents, for instance, prepare for a facilitated IEP meeting or mediation, for sure. Some resources we want you to be aware of. And then call us if we can help. Funny little picture there. Okay, so that's it for my presentation. I think we're going to go ahead. I'm going to let our panelists are turning their videos on now. Excellent. They can turn their audio on and turn things over to you, Allison, to start this discussion with it.
Perfect. Thank you. So you've obviously been hearing me hop in every so often, but like Rob said earlier, I am the Assistant Director of CERC, and I'm so grateful for our panelists that are here today to kind of give some perspective. We've got one of our facilitators / mediators here, Missy Downer. Thank you, Missy, for joining us. She's going to talk about her perspective. We have Jolanda Bings here, and she is the Assistant Director of Special Education at Yukon Public Schools. And she's been through facilitated IEPs, some at the request of parents initially, some at the request of the school, but obviously has participated in a couple of these meetings. So we're going to get a kind of a school perspective from Jolanda. And then we have Amy Sinar here, who is a parent advocate with Oklahoma Parent Center, who's also been through a couple of facilitated IEP meetings, helping support that parent perspective. I want to provide one caveat here. There are obviously other parent advocacy resources across our state. It's not that you only have to call Amy or Oklahoma Parent Center. It's every state is required to to have at least one parent training and information center, possibly more dependent upon the population. And for the state of Oklahoma, the federal funding is through Oklahoma Parent Center. So they are in partnership with the SDE and by nature of that with CERC. So thank you to Missy, Jolanda, and Amy for being here.
My pleasure.
Of course.
Happy to be here.
So I think I want to start with something specific to Missy first, since you're one of our service providers. So talk me through what would be like a primary suggestion that you would make to schools and parents and when they're making their preparation? Is there anything in addition to what Dr. Kiter talked about that you would really want parents and schools to know before they walk into a facilitated IEP?
I think what I feel like is probably the most important thing is coming in with, I hate to say a positive attitude because that feels so Pollyannish, but I think that that really can pull the walls down to be a lot more open and, you know, allowing. So I think preparing yourself, not necessarily for the logistics of everything I want for my kid, but how do I bring how do I prepare myself to be ready to hear everything going on? Because I think what my experience is, so many times parents come in so guarded, and sometimes the schools come in so guarded that it feels like we're all robots, and I think that just really gets in the way of being able to communicate. So I think to be prepared, I mean, I feel like people do their homework automatically because they're already in the IEP, you know, situation. They're already invested in those processes by the time we get involved. So they already have done their homework. They have the list of things, you know, that they want to address. And so I feel like to best prepare for that particular meeting or day, kind of coming in with that positive, open attitude can be the hardest thing, I think.
I think that's a great point. Thank you, Missy. I do think it's hard, especially because by the time they get to us, usually either that's so many complex issues or there has been some conflict. And so resetting yourself from either or both sides to go in with that like open, positive heart, basically, and being almost vulnerable again from both sides. I think that is really difficult, but it can really shift the mindset. So thank you. I like that.
Sure.
And then so let's do Jolanda. What's one thing that you would like parents to understand about the school's role in the IEP process and on the team?
I think that there are lots of things that I'd like for them to understand, but I feel bad for parents coming in because they're always outnumbered when they come to an IEP meeting. There's always more school personnel present typically than there are family members present. And so it feels daunting in that way sometimes to families because there's more of us. It feels like there's more of us than there are of you. And we're going to rule this because we have more votes on this issue, but it's not that way. So what I would love for parents to understand is that that we value their opinion and they are the expert, like you've said earlier, on their kiddo. They know them better than anyone, and they know them. They're with them longer than we are. You know, all the things. So we want to value that, and we want to listen and have them be an equal team member, an equal part of the discussion that we're having at the table. And that's one thing that I think is so important to establish and just say up front, that we want you to know that we're going to listen to you and that you have an equal voice at this table.
Thank you. I think that's big. And I think a lot of times you're right. It does feel intimidating. They're coming in and they're thinking, why are there this many people here? Some of you I've never seen before. What is it that you do with my kid? You know, it can be really daunting. And they do kind of think, well, they've got all these votes. Well, it's two parties at a meeting. It is the school and the parent. It's not a vote, even though it can feel like it, right, with those numbers. And so I'm gonna kind of, because Amy, I don't want to forget about a specific parent perspective question, but it's I'm kind of going to build on what you said and ask a question to really any of you. because what you talked about is real and true. They are equal team members. But so what happens though when you get to a point where maybe the IEP team has had those great discussions, the parent has given their input, the school has heard it, but maybe there's not agreement or consensus. I mean, the hope is that there's good collaborative discussion, but it doesn't mean that there has to be consensus. That's the ultimate goal. So what happens, or what are you all's perspective, and give me kind of your input as to how that's gone in these meetings, maybe how a facilitator could help explain, because there are some obligations on the part of the school. And how does that relate to meaningful, which is an IDEA obligation, to meaningful parental participation? So anybody can kind of jump in. Any of you all on the panel can kind of give some insight as to where I'm going here, if that makes sense.
Well, I'll say, and Amy, I would love to hear your perspective from the parent point of view. I was just going to say, sometimes stopping in the middle of, after a parent speaks about, their concerns and their issues. A lot of times I find that kind of pausing for a second and restating the concerns of the parent and making sure that I'm understanding, as a third party coming in cold, that I'm understanding what their concerns are. So they feel a little bit more like, okay, now this third party understands it. So they can confirm that and I can confirm that the school understands those concerns. So I've used that, particular strategy myself in facilitations.
I think that's huge, because a lot of times they're speaking different languages, right? They may be saying the same thing, the parent and the school, to try to address a specific need, but maybe they're speaking different languages about it, because you've got, I don't mean literally, which also could happen. That's a whole nother barrier, right?
Sure.
But you've got a parent asking for this thing and they're using certain terminology, and the school's got a different terminology for what effectively is doing the same thing. So I like that perspective, and making sure that they are on the same page. Amy, talk a little bit about, what happens if there is, they've had that participation, that facilitators use the strategies potentially to get, and they're at an understanding, but maybe there isn't agreement, because there doesn't have to be. That's the intention. But what if they don't agree?
Well, then the parent can consider some of their procedural safeguards of what Rob had gone through his presentation, such as going through a mediated IEP meeting, or requesting filing a state complaint, going through due process. There's so many different avenues that they can take, but ultimately we really want to come to the table. If it means coming back again in a facilitated IEP, that would be preferable, because it is an opportunity for not only the school. We don't want someone else, a third party, like in a due process. The hearing officer would be the one that would be making the decision. Within the facilitated IEP meeting, it's truly that collaboration between the school and the parent. They're the ones that are making the decision. We wouldn't want a third party to come in and make that decision for them. I don't think that'd be I don't believe that would be beneficial for the student in the long run. But again, that's building that rapport, and that's so difficult in that first meeting when you have a facilitator that maybe has only spoken to the school and talked to the parent maybe once, but yet we have to build this rapport so there's trust and that they feel comfortable. The parents feel they're in a safe place to sit and think for a minute about what their response would be or what their question would be. That space, that safe space, just to consider, so they can be a part of that, take advantage of the meaningful parental participation part of the IDEA.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I think that that's big, is in that them just being present doesn't mean meaningful participation. And so a lot of times the presence of an advocate or a facilitator, which again, both can be there at the same time, can really help to make sure there's meaningful participation, right? And that everybody's got an understanding. A lot of times, and I mean, I've seen this, I'm sure you guys have all seen this, the disagreements are really miscommunications. Are there times where there's truly disagreement? Everybody understands where everybody is at. You're still not on the same page. That's fine. Like you said, fine. You've got procedural safeguards, additional procedural safeguards. But a lot of it is it boils down to communication and not really understanding one another.
Right.
So I appreciate those perspectives from Missy and Amy and Jolanda. How about from the school side? You know, let's say you guys all get on the same page, whether that's through the support of an advocate and or a facilitator or one or the other. And you do have a true understanding of each other. There's been expression of, okay, I do understand where you're coming from now on both sides, but you still just don't agree because the parent might want one thing and the school maybe doesn't find that thing to be appropriate or necessary. Give a little bit of the school's perspective when that might happen and you're not reaching consensus in these meetings.
I feel like that's a difficult place to land. It's a difficult place to be. And if you don't have like that trust, like Amy was talking about, if this is not, you know, your third or fourth time to meet with this family and they don't know this team very well, you don't have that trust, you have to build it, and it takes time. And so I think one thing that I like to do in meetings is, and you talked about this just a little bit earlier, but it in the process, it kind of depends on where you are. If the kiddo's young, it's always nice to ask the family, and even if they're older, what are your goals for your child ultimately? What do you want them to have in the future? What do you want it to look like 4 years down the road, 5 years down the road, after graduation, whatever it is? What do you want that to look like? What are your dreams and hopes and goals for your kid? And then figuring that out from the family's perspective and figuring out how we can come alongside that family to make those things happen in a meaningful way for that kiddo, in a meaningful way for us, so that we can all come out kind of winning in that situation. And once we establish that, sometimes we can say, okay, that is something that we can help you with later on down the road. This piece that we're wanting to talk about today kind of is separate from that. We can do this, and then knowing what your goal is in the future, we can get to that, you know, next year or whatever, you know, in the transition process of that kiddo. So sometimes it helps to lay out a timeline a little bit of what the family sees and wants for that kiddo, what the kiddo wants. And so that can kind of help give some perspective there. Coming to consensus doesn't mean everyone's going to get everything that they want, right? It means we're going to give a little, and the parents are going to give a little, maybe, to get to the middle ground where we can all live with what's happening, knowing that we're going to have to be transparent, which I think is key. We're transparent with the families. We admit when we make mistakes, we fix them, we do better next time. We work toward that. Nobody's perfect, but we know that when we can come to a general agreement and we can put that in writing in the IEP, we know that we can put maybe some checks in place. Like, let's meet back in like 6 weeks and see how things are going. Let's try this. Give us, you know, at least a few weeks to give this a try. We'll meet back and see how it's working. If it's not, we'll come back to the table and talk about what we can do differently.
That's right.
Perfect.
Great.
I think that's a really great point about the consensus part, right? Because on the flip side of a parent feeling like they've not been participating meaningfully or not been afforded meaningful participation, sometimes parents view that as meaningful participation means I'm the decider of everything that happens with my kiddo in public school, right? Which again, it's your child, and I get that perspective. I've got a kiddo. I get it. But ultimately, schools also have the legal obligation, right? So sometimes those parents are thinking, but I've asked for this over and over and over. And they may be able to accept and eventually come to consensus once you guys have an understanding, and again, meet in the middle potentially somewhere, right? Because it's what's appropriate. Again, there's reasonable terminology there as well, and what can be implemented for that child. What can the school effectively implement and follow too? And if what the parent is wanting for that child, the school has maybe data and concerns, hopefully a lot of data to support why it might not be appropriate, it is still the school's legal, falls fully on the school, an affirmative obligation to provide that free and appropriate public education. And I think sometimes that can be really difficult for parents to understand as well. And while facilitators aren't there to say, oh, this is FAPE or this is not, and rule on anything, facilitators and even parent advocates too can hopefully help the parents understand that. And like you said, Yolanda, even as a school team, being transparent, like I hear you and I know you want this. Right now, the data is showing your child's not there or ready for it. We can work towards getting there, hopefully. However, it is our obligation. Because again, let's say the school does something the parent wants just because the parent wants it, but maybe the data doesn't support that it would be appropriate for that kiddo. That school is really at fault if they don't make progress, even though the parent requested it. And so I think that makes things really nuanced and difficult in these discussions too. So I really love you saying being transparent and that it's okay to say that to a parent. Here's where we're at, you know, and talking about that. And I think even our facilitators, while not all of them have background in special ed, we don't want to hire people who have necessarily represented parents or represented schools, right? But they have this knowledge where maybe they can help to clarify those things in these facilitated meetings that remember this is the school's responsibility. That doesn't mean they're making a judgment call, right, wrong, or indifferent on either side, right? So I appreciate this discussion. Amy, what's something, because you've been as an advocate across many districts and in lots of meetings, whether facilitated or not, but what's something in a facilitated IEP meeting? What's something you've seen a facilitator do? Is there a strategy or a skill you've seen them use that's really helped the team in those discussions and getting through a difficult process?
Well, I'd have to say that within a facilitated IEP, one of the most important techniques that are used, and this is early on, is of course introducing who's in the room and being able to identify who's a part of that IEP team decision-making group. And sometimes parents really don't even understand who is a part of the IEP team. And as an advocate, oftentimes I will stop and say, may I check with you to make sure you understand who's a member of the IEP team? You, meaningful parental participation as the parent, the general education teacher, the special education teacher, and the administrator, and it oftentimes is the school psychologist that has provided all the documentation for the evaluations. So being able to identify who are the typical decision makers is really important for the parent to understand. And then, of course, going through and making sure this is not a majority rule situation, but it is a conversation that oftentimes facilitators will help maintain, driving that bus or the navigator, making sure we're staying on target and track, that it is the child that we're keeping in the focus in their future. So those are two of the most important things I have felt that have been really imperative to continuing that conversation and gaining that trust.
I think that's really helpful, Amy. And I think when you're thinking about the meetings and you're walking into, when they're not facilitated, you're just walking into a regular meeting. Sometimes the school can get so caught up in their procedural obligations that they have to abide by. It's almost like they forget to be like, oh, wait a second, let's make sure the parent knows all of us, not only our name and like, I mean, I've been at many IEP meetings in my previous role where it'd be like, well, I'm the ad rep today. I'm this, I'm that. Well, hang on, explain what that means. Explain whether that means you actually work with the child or you're here to fulfill some other purpose. But it's that taking the perspective of the other party, they're not really thinking through, wait a second, does the parent have this understanding? And that neutral person can come in and they don't know all of that. So they can help to facilitate that discussion. And they've got, because they're not a part of the team, they've almost got that backed up 30,000-foot view of things and can notice these. Not that the school's trying to bulldoze the parent. It's just the thing that they do every day. They might have 6 IEP meetings that in 2 days, and so they're just kind of going along with what they do. And having that, I think that's huge. Thank you, Amy. That's a great point.
You're welcome.
I was also going to add a little bit to that. I have also been in a couple of facilitated IEPs where, of course, there's many different school professionals there, but also there's the mom, there's the stepdad, there's the dad from out of town, there's the girlfriend, there's the older brother who knows the kid? I mean, and so walking in as the third party, like being able to navigate, and I don't want to say direct traffic, but it's kind of like that. Like, okay, coming back to what Amy said, let's talk about, the child and who is part of the IEP team. It's so important to hear everyone's voice, because your experiences with the child can really help us find the right path forward, even in an educational system. But sometimes, I mean, especially if I have seen that in kind of smaller communities where it's like, we have to show up strong for this kid, it's like they bring everybody. And not that that's a bad thing, but I do think bringing it back around to, let's talk about who is part of the main IEP decision-making team. And, when kids get older, they can be part of that, meeting. They have a voice. It's so important to hear what they have to say, and encouraging that when it gets to middle school and high school ages. But yeah, I think sometimes the room can get so big and a little bit chaotic. It is a lot like, let's stay on track and on focus. Where are we on the IEP? What are we addressing today? This kind of stuff. I think that can kind of go both ways too, not just with how many school personnel, but also from a family and advocate. Sometimes therapists show up, it just could get big.
Overwhelming
sometimes.
Yeah.
That's a good point. And that can help orient kind of both parties to who everyone is, and again, and their purpose there. What might they contribute to that? And sometimes that almost does get forgotten when the two parties are coming together, and it's like, oh, let's get through this. Parents are coming in with their perspective, school's coming in with their task and their procedures they've got to go through, and you're doing this and you walk away and you're like, what just happened? So having that can be really helpful. I think that's a really good point. Missy, if you don't mind talking through, because I think it's such a unique role. Previous to coming to CERC, I had worked at a district special ed office for a school district, and CERC was my phone a friend a lot, requesting meetings, sometimes just calling, and again, getting those individual consultations. We've got this situation, help me walk through some things. And so I had been through lots of facilitated IEPs and a couple of mediations as well, but as one of the parties. And in this role, being able to come and even observe some of the sessions and kind of following around our neutral third parties as we do these evaluations and training components. It's a whole nother ball game to be in that neutral role. So I kind of want to hear from you, because I think this can be enlightening for schools and parents and parent advocates to hear. What's your mindset when you're preparing to walk into a facilitated IEP meeting? Like, what are you thinking through? How are you preparing yourself? And what are some things that you find yourself doing sometimes in these meetings to help the parties?
Breathing deeply sometimes if it gets really heavy and elevated, I guess is the right word. Sometimes it's like, okay, I mean, I love the bus analogy. And sometimes when, whether it's a mediation, I know I'm in the driver's seat, or if I feel like it's getting elevated and I'm in that front row, it's like, okay, where is it that I can step in and bring the calm? Because it feels like there's a lot of chaos happening. So finding the right time to come in. And so preparing, in my mind, first of all, I think touching base, if possible, sometimes it's not possible, but touching base with the parent and a school administrator to just introduce myself and give them some time, if they need some time, to tell me about the situation, the IEP, the child, whatever it is, that got us to the point of needing a facilitator. So that I think is huge if possible. And then I think after I get all the information, looking over my notes and then saying, okay, today is a brand new opportunity and situation. All of the stuff that I have is helpful, And I have to walk in with, today is going to be a positive way forward, or a positive hour and a half or whatever, you know, however long it takes. And I think coming at it with that positivity, I think is kind of like I said earlier, I think that makes a big difference in the way you approach, you know, just meeting everyone, greeting everyone, whether it's the day before, and then on that day of the meeting, getting there in time to try to look at where everybody should sit. Yesterday when I arrived, I went to an IEP facilitation, and the conference room was behind, you know, kind of catty corner to the office, and a poor child had just thrown up in there. And so they were like, you can't come in yet. And I was like, oh, but is that the room I'm going to be in? And I was counting the chairs, and I was like, okay, I can sit here, they can sit there. But cause it made me a little nervous because I wasn't able to actually get in that space, you know, before the parents and everyone got there, but it all worked out. But I really feel like that is another way to prepare, is to get there, kind of get a feel for the tension that's may already be in the room, and try to pull that down, and then, you know, configure where everybody's going to be. I think puts me at ease.
Okay.
As well.
I like how you brought up the chaos and the tension, because sometimes that is outward chaos, right? And it is difficult managing the conversation. But I also imagine that sometimes you're seeing this inner tension of the parties, that maybe this is not a combative, people interrupting each other, but you can feel that tension. And maybe sometimes that role is where you're having to, like you've said before, pull it out of the parties to make sure that everybody's being heard, because you're feeling some sort of tension, I guess. I mean, I don't know what other word to say, even though it's inner. You're having to still watch for those things. It might not be obvious, right? Is that a skill you've had to kind of hone in on in these meetings as well?
For sure. I know, Rob, when we talk about the crucial conversations, we talk about silence and verbal silence. And oftentimes when parents are faced, like Jolanda said, with so many, you know, they feel outnumbered, they will, you know, so I have to remind sometimes, you know, we are here. We're all in the same room. This is the time. This is the place. Let's bring up any concerns we have so we can get them out and try to figure out, you know, what needs to happen with the IEP. You know, where we see eye to eye, where we don't see eye to eye. So pulling that, when you see that kind of clamming up and that silence, you can feel the tension. And, you know, I definitely think that's a strategy that's often used.
Yeah. And I think that's good, that the neutral person, again, they're allowed to kind of back up and watch for those signs, because you're not a part of either party. And so you're able to really do that. It takes skill, but you're able to do it. I know we've got to kind of wrap up here. So I think before we go, what I'd like to ask, and I'm sorry, I'm going slightly off script, but I want to ask Jolanda and Amy. So Jolanda, from a school side of things, if you could, like, if you're just talking to schools now, because I asked you a question about what would you like parents to know. If you wanted other people in your position as a school leader, a district special ed leader, whatever you want to say, that is there something that you would like them to know about this IEP facilitation process, or any experience that you feel like they would need to be aware of? Is there something you feel like needs to be?
Sure. So the first thing I'd like to say is just don't be hesitant to reach out, because sometimes we've gotten into situations where we have difficult meetings over and over and over with the family, and we just continue on and we go through them. But don't hesitate to reach out to start a facilitated process with that family, because I am just personally, I'm directionally challenged when I'm driving. Like, I have to always put on Google Maps, and I have to have all of that in place, or I feel like I'm gonna make a big mistake and end up in the wrong place, and it often happens anyway. But for me, having my navigation in my car when I'm going wherever it is a comfort, right? And sometimes I love the analogy of the bus, because that navigation, that facilitator being there, is a comfort. It's a comfort to me as a school district, because I know they're not they're not gonna make decisions for us. They're not going to, do anything like that. But just knowing that I have someone there helping navigate the issues that we're going through on either side, because they're on my side, not because they're on the parents, but just as a neutral person, like we talked about. But having that there was just a comfort, knowing that this situation had been difficult. It has been because we've come upon difficult things that we couldn't all agree on, or that we argued about, or whatever. And so just it was just a comfort, and knowing that that person was there for that purpose was just helpful. And after each one, we've always been able to move to the next thing that we need to. Not because they're magic or anything like that, but just because I think we do have a situation where both sides feel like we can be heard, and both sides feel like we have meaningful in experience with that situation. And so I think that not being afraid to reach out, it doesn't mean that we're failing as a school if we call you guys for help, right? It doesn't mean that at all. It just means that we're gonna employ anything we can to get to what is best for the kiddo.
I love that and appreciate that perspective so much, Jolanda, because again, I was in a school district position previously, and I used to call CERC. Never thought of this perspective of it like, oh, this is someone else coming in and this could be scary. I didn't have that perspective, and now being in this role, there are some districts who do, and they're like, well, what is it that you're going to do? Like that, yeah, you're admitting defeat or something. Or I've even had directors ask, is this going to go into my district data profile? I'm like, no, this is not any sort of punishment or checkbox in a negative column. And so I so appreciate that perspective, and having that, again, I think I mentioned it earlier, a little bit of vulnerability. Like, this doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong, but because, again, like I think you also said earlier, like apologizing when you've done wrong too. No one's perfect, and it is okay to reach out to have another perspective and come in to be that neutral. So I really appreciate that. Amy, what about so if you were a parent advocate speaking to parents, is there something that you want them to walk away with as an understanding or advice or what may have you?
Again, I hope that parents, after we have maybe prepared for the meeting, we've gone over and I've been able maybe to translate what are some of the concerns that the parent has, so the school can understand, okay, we're talking about least restrictive environment here. This is what they want. This is how they want to see their child in their placement, so I can be that little translator for what the parent is saying. But back to the prepping for the meeting, so they have a better understanding about the law, the IDEA, and what are those responsibilities and what are the rights, and understanding that they are going to have to learn to become their child's advocate. And that's a skill set, that's a lifelong skill set that people will be taking, and their child will be mirroring that if they aren't able to describe how their disability adversely affects their ability to learn in school, or maybe go to the doctor, or social situations, we want to be able to empower parents to be able to express those concerns to the IEP team. And sometimes, like I said, sometimes we might have to interpret a little bit and check for understanding from the team too. Can we see outside of the box here and understand what the parent is looking for? But ultimately, we just want to empower them and to continue moving forward, to continue to look for more information, to go to trainings, to look at, contact the Oklahoma Parent Center or CERC, or go to their assistant director of special education directly and feel comfortable in asking questions, that there's no shame in asking those questions, because I think we're all learning all this new terminology, that new language. So that would be my hope.
Yeah, well, thank you. And it's all about that communication component too, and not being afraid. So I think that's really great. Thank you. Thank you guys so much, Missy and Amy and Jolanda. I know, Rob, you want to bring up the QR code and link for the survey for today, right?
I wanna-
And then that we've got our next webinar in November on demystifying mediation. We will have another panel of a different one of our service providers, parent rep and school representation for mediation. And hopefully you guys can join us for that as well. And again, thank you to Missy, Jolanda at UConn, and Amy with Oklahoma Parent Center. We so appreciate y'all. And thank you to Rob for presenting today and on giving us a better understanding of facilitated IEP meetings.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And thank you for those of you attending today. Hope that you'll be able to join us next month for the mediation webinar. I think it's November 20th. Is that right?
That's right. Yep. And then if you have the opportunity to scan that QR code,
Oh, yeah.
then we want to always improve our training. So get us some feedback from today's training. So anything else, Rob?
Can't think of anything else. Tremendous. I really appreciated the answers and the discussions you were having. Made me think of so many things we could do if we had more time. This was, I think, very, very productive. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Have a
It was
great
a pleasure.
day.
Bye.
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 Bye.